My name is Wren Halstead, 30 years old. Snow was falling in the kind of hush that makes a parking lot look like a postcard, soft flakes catching in the glow of Riverside Country Club's lanterns. The building itself radiated warmth, every mullioned window banded in white garland and pin-pricked gold, a chandelier swaying lightly beyond frosted glass, like a star seen through a thin cloud. I parked where I always do, when I have the choice. Self-park, far from the valets who jog with practiced smiles. My 4-year-old Subaru exhaled a little steam into the night. It looked sturdy and unremarkable among the lineup of glossy black sedans and cars with badges that mean something to people who keep score. I wore a dark green dress, simple, a little softer at the waist than it used to be, and my grandmother's pearl necklace that still smells faintly of her favorite soap when it warms against my skin. Nothing that would invite commentary, nothing that would give anyone here the pleasure of saying, "You clean up nicely." I adjusted the strand and told myself to breathe. Blending, I've learned, is just another kind of armor. At the portico, the family had arranged themselves like a receiving line. My father, George, stood at center in a tailored charcoal suit that made his shoulders look broader than they are. My mother, Patricia, wore a red cocktail dress that fit her like a thesis statement, heels planted with purpose. My brother, Derek, hovered a pace behind them, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on the back of his wife, Cynthia, impeccable as a holiday ad, even her laugh lines curated. "Wren," my father said as I climbed the steps. He didn't reach for me. "You're late." "It's 6:15, I said. "Merry Christmas, Dad." "Wren," my mother chimed, the words sliding off her teeth like a lozenge. "There's been a change of plans." I stopped. "What kind of change?" My father crossed his arms, a gesture he learned somewhere men teach each other how to look like gates. "Tonight's dinner is members only. Club policy. Very strict about it, especially on holidays." "I'm family," I said too gently. I was invited. "You're family," my mother agreed, smile tight. "But you're not a member. The club has standards, dear. You understand." Derek took a step forward, his tone pitched for reasonable. "Come on, Wren. Don't make this difficult. We told you weeks ago we were upgrading our membership. Platinum level, very exclusive." "You told me you were having Christmas dinner here and I should come," I said. "You didn't mention a door." "Circumstances change," Cynthia said, studying her manicure like it was giving a weather report. "Platinum members get priority access during peak times. The club can't have non-members cluttering the dining room. It affects the atmosphere." "Cluttering," I repeated. I let the words sit there and frost over. "It's about maintaining a certain level of quality ambiance," my mother added briskly. "People expect that when they pay premium membership fees." "I see." Dad's expression softened, which somehow made it worse. "Look, Wren, we're not trying to be cruel. It's just reality. You're not at the same level as the rest of us. You work at that nonprofit. You live in that little apartment. You drive that—" He flicked 2 fingers toward the lot, economy car. "This club is for people who've achieved certain things." "And I haven't achieved those things," I said for him. "Not yet," my mother said, benevolent as a frost. "Maybe someday. Tonight you really should find somewhere more appropriate. Applebee's is usually open on Christmas Eve. Very festive." Derek shifted, guilt pricking, but not enough to pierce. "Don't take it personally. It's not about you specifically. It's about the club's standards." "Right," I said. "The standards." A couple swept past us into the lobby, the man nodding to my father with easy familiarity. George, looking forward to dinner. Patricia, lovely as always. "Wonderful to see you, Harold," my mother sang, warm as mulled wine. The door closed behind them. The warmth shut off like a switch. She turned back to me, cold restored. "You really need to go now. People are starting to notice, and it's embarrassing." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," my father said. "We're building relationships here, important ones. Standing at the entrance like, well, it doesn't look good." "Like I'm some kind of beggar," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped. "We're being realistic about social hierarchies. You're 30, Wren. You should understand how the world works." I looked at them one by one. My father playing bouncer to a place I was told was ours. My mother embarrassed that I existed outside the script. My brother uncomfortable but eager to be soothed. Cynthia radiant on other people's ladders. I could already hear my grandmother. "You don't get points for bearing it gracefully." But grace is a habit, and I'm well trained. "Okay," I said, "I'll go." "Good girl," my mother said, pivoting without a second thought to charm a pair of arriving members. Maybe next year you'll have improved your situation enough to join us. I started back down the steps, heels crisping the dusting of snow. The club smelled like evergreen and something buttered. Laughter floated through the glass like a song from a department store. Their voices behind me flicked on and off like lights for different guests. None of those lights had warmed my skin. "Miss Halstead, wait, Miss Halstead." I turned. Richard Chin, the club director, hurried through the doors, jacket unbuttoned, breath fogging. Richard is a man who wears composure like a well-cut coat. Seeing panic on him made the night tilt a little. "Richard," I started, already lifting a hand. "It's fine." "It's absolutely not fine." His gaze cut past me to my family, then back, some calculus happening behind his eyes. "What's going on? Why are you leaving?" "Members only tonight," I said, keeping my voice even. Family explained the policy. Richard blinked, confusion pulling his brows together. "Members only? We don't have a members-only policy on Christmas Eve. We're fully booked, but that's because—" He stopped. His eyes traveled over my family as if reading a menu he suddenly didn't recognize. "Did you tell Miss Halstead she couldn't enter?" "Now look here," my father said, stepping forward, indignation an old friend. "We're platinum members. We have every right to determine who we dine with." "I'm Richard Chin," Richard said, his tone returning to steel. "Club director. We've met, Mr. Anderson, during your application process." "Exactly," Dad said. "So you know we're valued members, and we're telling you our dinner party tonight is members only." "Your family members only," Richard repeated softly, like he was tasting the words for poison. His gaze slid to me. "Mr. Anderson, do you know who Miss Halstead is?" "Of course I know who she is," Dad said, impatient. "She's my daughter, and, while we love her, she's not a member." "Mr. Anderson," Richard said carefully, each syllable placed as if it mattered, "Miss Halstead is not just a member." Cynthia folded her arms. "She's not a member at all, that's the point." "No, Mrs. Anderson," Richard said, turning so his voice carried to the doorway where faces had begun to cluster. "I mean, Miss Halstead is not just a member. She is—" He glanced at me once, as if asking permission. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. "The owner." There are silences that feel like peace, and silences that feel like the moment before glass breaks. This was the latter. The snow seemed to hang in the air and consider itself. "The what?" my mother said, the edges gone from her words. "The owner," Richard repeated, more firmly now. "Miss Halstead owns Riverside Country Club. She has owned it for the past 6 years, through Halstead Holdings, LLC. The property, the golf course, the tennis facilities, and all associated assets." The assistant director, Sharon Mitchell, stepped into the doorway, radio at her hip, eyes flicking from Richard to me. "Is everything—" She spotted me properly and adjusted mid-sentence. "Miss Halstead, I didn't realize you were here. Of course." She turned to my family, professional smile sharpening. "Ms. Halstead is the sole owner of Riverside. She's also been incredibly gracious about preserving our traditions and staff." "That's impossible," Derek said, half laughing, half not. "Wren works at a nonprofit. She, makes 40 grand a year?" "I work for a charitable foundation," I said, because they were speaking as if I weren't there. "I never said it was my only job." "You drive a Subaru," my mother said, as if naming a species. "I like my Subaru." "You live in a 2-bedroom apartment," Cynthia added, bewildered, insulted. "I like my apartment." "This is some kind of mistake," my father said, color creeping up his neck. "She can't afford to own a country club. Look at her. She shops at Target." "I assure you there is no mistake," Richard said, the professional edge fully back. "Miss Halstead purchased Riverside 6 years ago and has maintained ownership quietly. We've appreciated her support for staff and programming." Cynthia's mouth worked, then found sound. "How?" "The same way I afford everything else," I said. I turned the pearls once between my fingers, a small anchor. "I work for it. I founded a software company when I was 22. Sold it when I was 26. "For how much?" Derek asked before he thought to hide the question. "Enough," I said. "Enough to start the foundation. Enough to invest in places I love." A murmur moved through the doorway, the kind that says news is a tide, and you can either brace or let it lift you. My mother's hand found my father's sleeve. He shook it off and stood straighter, as if posture could bend facts. The snow caught in his hair and didn't melt. Richard cleared his throat. "Miss Halstead, I apologize. If there had been any indication your family was attempting to bar you—" "It's all right," I said, and then, because false grace is a cheap currency, I added, "You didn't know." It's not all right, he said, voice cooling. He looked past me again, and there was a new temperature in the air, the administrative kind that writes things down. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to need to speak with you about club conduct policies. Conduct policies? My father repeated, now genuinely at sea. We're platinum members. You've paid $12,000, Richard said evenly. With that come expectations. Chief among them, respect. Sharon's radio crackled. She listened, then glanced at Richard. We have guests in the lobby asking about the disturbance. The Robertsons are looking for Miss Halstead. Of course they were. The Robertsons send me photos of their grandchildren every year, the ones whose scholarships we renewed when the hospital bills came. I could already hear Mrs. Robertson. Emma, dear, are you joining us? Miss Halstead, Richard said quietly. Your table? In a minute, I said. My mother's eyes were glassy. My father's jaw had become a hinge. We were in the middle of something. What we were in the middle of hung there. A door I was told I couldn't walk through, and a key I never asked to brandish. Snow kept falling, light as powdered sugar on the stone. Inside, a carol rose and faded. For once, I didn't smooth anything over. I just stood on my own steps and let the night be exactly what it was. For a moment, no one said a word. Even the snow seemed to hesitate, caught between the streetlights and the cold. My family stood frozen, my mother's painted lips parted, my father blinking like the air had gone too thin to breathe, Derek's face flushing a confused shade of red, and Cynthia's mouth twisting into disbelief that bordered on fear. The owner, my mother finally managed, her voice brittle. That can't be right. You work at that little foundation. I tilted my head slightly. The Halstead Foundation, I corrected. It's not that little. Derek gave a shaky laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. You're joking. Ren, come on. This is ridiculous. You don't even like golf. I don't, I agreed. But I do like preservation. This club was in danger of being sold to developers. I bought it 6 years ago, quietly. You're lying, Cynthia blurted. She's lying, George. Richard's tone stayed calm, steady, authoritative. Mrs. Anderson, I've worked for Miss Halstead for 6 years. I assure you she is not lying. She is our employer. All staff contracts, including mine, are under Halstead Holdings. My father's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. When he finally found his voice, it cracked with indignation. You expect me to believe my daughter owns this club? I don't expect you to believe anything, I said quietly. Belief isn't required for the truth to exist. Sharon, the assistant director, stepped forward, her professionalism unwavering. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, your daughter is the legal owner of Riverside Country Club. We confirmed her ownership when your membership was processed 8 weeks ago. My mother blinked. Confirmed? Sharon nodded. It's standard protocol for all new members. You provided your bank statement. We verified the ownership registry. Miss Halstead's name was listed as property title holder. You verified, Dad began, his voice rising. Then why didn't anyone tell us? Because it wasn't relevant to your membership, Richard said, and Miss Halstead requested discretion regarding her ownership. They all looked at me then, their faces shifting through disbelief, confusion, and dawning humiliation. You let us think. My mother's voice trembled now, no longer sharp, but incredulous. Like the ground had vanished under her heels. You let us think you were barely scraping by. I didn't let you think anything, I said evenly. You made assumptions. I never corrected them because I didn't see the point. But, my father stammered, the Subaru, the apartment. Why would you? I like my car, I like my apartment. I don't measure my life by square footage or engine type. Cynthia gave a harsh laugh. Well, maybe you should have mentioned you were a millionaire before letting us embarrass ourselves. I turned to her, my tone even, but edged with ice. You did that all on your own. Behind me, a few of the arriving guests had slowed, pretending to admire the wreaths while clearly listening. The whisper of curiosity spread through the entryway like fire through dry pine. My father tried to recover, his pride clawing its way back to the surface. This is absurd. There must be some misunderstanding. We're platinum members. We don't deserve to be treated like... Like what? I asked softly. Like people who tried to bar someone from their own property? Richard took a small step forward, voice still calm but carrying unmistakable authority. Mr. Anderson, with respect, your behavior tonight violates the club's member conduct policy. As the director, I have a duty to report incidents like this to the board. The board, my mother repeated faintly. Sharon's radio crackled. Richard, came a voice through static. Mr. Peyton's on his way. He heard about the commotion. My father's head snapped up. Charles Peyton, the board president? Yes, Richard said. He'll want to address this directly. Cynthia's face paled. Oh, George. Within minutes, the heavy doors opened again, and Charles Peyton emerged, his cane clicking against the marble with deliberate rhythm. His reputation preceded him, 68 years old, a former attorney, respected and feared in equal measure. What's this I'm hearing? Charles demanded. Why are guests gathered outside on Christmas Eve? Mr. Peyton, Richard said quickly, stepping forward. There's been a misunderstanding regarding Miss Halstead's entry. Charles turned towards me, eyes widening when recognition struck. Miss Halstead, you were kept waiting outside? I was asked to leave, I said. He spun toward my parents. By whom? My father hesitated. We didn't realize... You didn't realize what? Charles barked. That you were barring the club's owner from her own property? A collective gasp rippled through the group gathered near the door. Charles shook his head slowly, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. I've been on this board for 20 years. Never in my life have I seen such blatant disrespect. Sir, my mother began weakly, it was a mistake. Indeed it was, he interrupted, and it will have consequences. He turned to Richard. Their membership file? Right here, Richard said, handing over his tablet. Charles scrolled briefly, his expression darkening. 8 weeks as platinum members. Currently applying for Heritage Club status. Derek stiffened. Yes, that's correct. Well, Charles said coldly, that's over. Cynthia's face drained of color. You can't... I can and I will, Charles said. Heritage status is reserved for members of distinguished character, not those who treat our staff or our owner like second-class citizens. He looked at me then, his voice softening. Miss Halstead, I apologize on behalf of the board. You deserve better than this. Thank you, Charles, I said quietly. But I'm not the one who needs to apologize. All eyes swung back to my family. My father tried to find the old commanding tone, but it faltered now. Wren, let's not make a scene. I didn't make this scene, I said. You did. I was just trying to attend Christmas dinner. The silence stretched. Somewhere inside, a carol reached its chorus, muffled by thick glass. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then up. Miss Halstead, the Robertsons are asking if you'll be joining them for dinner. They're waiting at your usual table. The words landed like a final twist of irony. I smiled faintly. Tell them I'll be in shortly. Then I looked back at my family, at their shock, their embarrassment, the first cracks of realization spreading across their polished faces. You said I wasn't at your level, I said softly. You were right. I never was. I turned toward the entrance, the warmth of the club spilling out as the doors opened. Behind me, Richard's voice was already issuing orders to the staff. Please note this incident for review by the Heritage Committee, and Sharon, have security prepare a report. I stepped inside, the scent of pine and cinnamon wrapping around me. The world beyond the threshold shifted, heat after cold, light after shadow, power reclaimed not by shouting, but by simply walking through a door that had always been mine. The lobby of Riverside Country Club was warm, almost too warm after the cold outside. My cheeks burned as the air hit them, the sharp contrast of humiliation and vindication still pulsing beneath my skin. I could feel eyes on me as I walked in, staff members and guests pretending to focus on the garlanded staircase or the enormous Christmas tree glittering in the center of the hall. I didn't look back at my family, but I could hear them following, their footsteps hesitant, uneven. Richard Chin stayed beside me, all composure again, but with a current of restrained anger that wasn't for me. Miss Halstead, he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear, would you prefer we seat your family in a private room? I can have a table prepared elsewhere if you'd rather avoid... No, I said softly. Let them keep the reservation they made. His brow lifted slightly, but he didn't argue. Understood. The staff was already gathering near the front desk, whispering. Sharon, the assistant director, was quietly briefing them, her expression tight and professional. When she caught my eye, she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, a silent promise that the situation would be handled with precision. Charles Peyton was waiting near the concierge stand, his cane angled against his leg. He was mid-conversation with Sharon, who was holding an open iPad displaying membership files. The moment he saw me, he straightened. Miss Halstead, he said, his voice carrying easily through the high-ceilinged lobby. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, though my pulse was still drumming in my throat. Good, he said, his tone cooling as he turned to face my family. Because this, whatever this is, won't stand. Richard, what do we know so far? Richard glanced at his phone. I've already reviewed the Anderson membership file. My mother frowned. Anderson? That's the name on your membership account, Richard said evenly. Not Halstead. Your platinum membership was initiated 8 weeks ago. Application for Heritage Club status is currently pending. However, he scrolled down the tablet, we also have several incident reports tied to your account. Incident reports? Derek repeated, voice tight. Richard nodded. 3 separate complaints from servers about dismissive behavior, 2 complaints from the valet staff regarding verbal rudeness, and 1 report from the golf course superintendent about green damage that was never compensated. That was an accident, my father said quickly. Accidents become patterns when they're not acknowledged, Charles said flatly, and when paired with what just happened tonight, it paints an unflattering picture of your conduct as members. Cynthia's voice rose, brittle and shrill. You can't hold us responsible for a misunderstanding. We thought there was a members-only policy. We didn't know she... Charles cut her off. That's exactly the point. You didn't know. You assumed. The silence that followed was broken only by the faint sound of the fireplace crackling. The front doors opened again, and a family entered. The Robertsons. Dr. Robertson spotted me instantly. Miss Halstead, he said warmly. Merry Christmas. Are you joining us this evening? I smiled, and something about that simple gesture made my mother's hand tremble on her purse strap. Yes, I said. I'll be at your table, if that's still all right. Of course, Mrs. Robertson said, delighted. You must. The children will be thrilled. They passed us, nodding politely to my stunned family. Behind them came the Tanakas, another long-term family of members, and then the Chins, whose daughter had just graduated Princeton on a scholarship funded by the Halstead Foundation. Miss Halstead, Mrs. Chin said, catching my hand gently, my daughter wanted me to thank you again for everything. She's doing wonderfully. That's wonderful to hear, I said. Tell her congratulations. They smiled and disappeared into the dining room, leaving my family pale and silent. The realization settled on them like snow, slow, suffocating, irreversible. Every face that passed greeted me warmly, a quiet reminder that the world they'd built their pride on was smaller than the one I'd quietly shaped around them. Richard cleared his throat. Miss Halstead, would you like to proceed to dinner? The Robertsons are waiting. In a moment, I said. I turned back to my family. You've made quite the impression tonight. My father's jaw flexed. Wren, please, don't humiliate us. Humiliate you? I echoed. You did that on your own. I'm just not cleaning it up for you this time. Charles exhaled, his patience fraying. Miss Halstead, how would you like us to handle this? As club owner, the decision is yours. I looked at each of them. My father's defensive anger, my mother's brittle shame, Derek's guilt, Cynthia's indignation, all of them still clinging to some version of control that was long gone. They'll stay for dinner, I said finally. My father blinked. Will what? You made the reservation. You'll keep it. But your membership status is now under review pending a full investigation into tonight's incident and the prior complaints. Richard nodded immediately, making a note on his tablet. Additionally, I continued, your Heritage Club application is denied, permanently. Cynthia gasped. You can't. I can, I said, and I am. Charles gave a short, approving nod. That seems fair. My mother reached for my hand. Wren, please, it's Christmas. We made a mistake. It's not just a mistake, I said quietly. It's a pattern. But you'll have time to reflect on that over dinner. She flinched, her hand falling away. Richard, I said, please remove their platinum discount effective immediately. Standard pricing on all food and beverages. He typed quickly. Done. Dad's face went crimson. Wren, this is vindictive. No, I said calmly. It's accountability. Charles stepped closer. Miss Halstead, if I may make a suggestion? Of course. At the next board meeting, we should consider an update to the conduct policy, something specific to this sort of behavior. Perhaps immediate membership suspension for discriminatory treatment toward other members or guests. I met his gaze. Make it happen. He smiled faintly. Gladly. I turned to Sharon. Please prepare a written report after the holidays. Every staff interaction, every complaint tied to this membership. I want it all on my desk by the 27th. Yes, ma'am, she said. And as for tonight, I added, seat them at their original table in the main dining room. Sharon hesitated. You don't want them moved somewhere more private? No, I said. Leave them where they are, full view. My family stared at me, the weight of that choice settling over them. You'll eat your Christmas dinner, I said, surrounded by the same people you wanted to impress, the ones who now know exactly what you did. Derek swallowed hard. That's cruel. I met his eyes. Is it or is it fair? He had no answer. Charles adjusted his cane, his voice low but satisfied. That's a lesson they won't forget. Good, I said. Let's make sure of it. I looked once more toward the dining room, where laughter and music floated through the doorway, warm and bright. Then back at my family, standing there under chandeliers that suddenly seemed too bright for them. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. "I have better company waiting." Then I walked toward the dining room, Richard and Charles flanking me like quiet sentinels. The carpet softened my footsteps, the warmth of the room swallowing the cold I'd carried for so long. Behind me, I could hear Sharon instructing the staff to escort the Anderson party to their table, center of the room, under the grand chandelier. Their own spotlight. The dining room of Riverside Country Club looked like a postcard from a world that believed in perfection. The chandeliers shimmered above tables dressed in ivory linens, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and polished silver. A string quartet played softly near the fireplace, their bows moving in slow, synchronized grace. Every table flickered with candlelight that made the gold ornaments on the tree glint like small, captured suns. I could see my family being led to their table, center of the room, exactly where I'd told Sharon to seat them. The staff pulled out chairs with practiced courtesy, every gesture polite but devoid of warmth. It wasn't cruelty, it was protocol. The same protocol my parents once praised when it kept the right kind of people comfortable. The Robertsons waved me over the moment I entered. "Wren, dear," Mrs. Robertson called, her face lighting up. "We were starting to worry you'd been stolen away." "Just delayed," I said with a small smile. Dr. Robertson stood to pull out my chair himself. "We're honored you're joining us." As I sat, I could feel the eyes from other tables drift toward us, then toward the Anderson party a few yards away. My father had his jaw set like a man bracing against a storm. My mother was speaking in hushed tones, her eyes darting around the room. Derek stirred his drink mechanically, and Cynthia's smile was frozen in place, too bright, too stiff. It was the first time I'd ever seen them look small. The waiter approached our table. "Miss Halstead," he said softly, genuine warmth in his voice. "The chef asked if you'd like your usual seared scallops with winter greens." "That would be perfect," I said. "Thank you, Mason." His face lit up. "Of course." Across the room, I saw my mother's face twitch. Recognition dawning that I knew the staff by name, that I didn't just eat here, I belonged here. Dr. Robertson lifted his glass. "To old friends and new traditions," he said, eyes glinting, "and to the people who remind us what integrity looks like." I smiled, lifting my glass. "To kindness, even when it's inconvenient." As the toast echoed softly through our table, the music swelled, a violin's high note threading through the murmur of the crowd. For the first time all evening, I felt something that wasn't anger. I felt peace. Between courses, more people came by to greet me. The Chins stopped to thank me again for their daughter's scholarship. The Tanakas told me their son's small business was thriving thanks to the micro-grant program my foundation started. Each conversation reminded me of why I'd built a life the way I did. Not for spectacle, but for substance. Across the room, my family sat untouched by that warmth. I watched as Cynthia tried to make conversation with a nearby couple, only to be politely ignored. My father's fork clinked against his plate too hard. My mother whispered something to Derek, and his shoulders stiffened. The isolation looked foreign on them. When Mason brought out dessert, chocolate torte with raspberry glaze, he leaned in slightly. "The Anderson party requested their check early," he murmured. "They seem uncomfortable." I looked at their table again. They weren't eating anymore. My mother kept glancing toward the exit. My father was staring at the floor. "Process it," I said quietly. "Standard pricing. But make sure the receipt is itemized." Mason nodded. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. As he walked away, Mrs. Robertson followed my gaze. "Is that your family, dear?" "It is." She sighed softly. "Sometimes the people closest to us take the longest to learn who we really are." "I think they're learning tonight," I said. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You handled yourself beautifully, Wren. Not everyone could show grace after what they did." "Grace," I said quietly, "isn't the same as silence. I was quiet for years. I think I've earned a little volume." Mrs. Robertson's smile was warm. "Then let it ring, my dear." Across the room, I saw Richard enter, tablet in hand. He walked to my family's table with that same calm professionalism he'd shown all night. He spoke for less than a minute. My father's face turned the color of the burgundy tablecloth. He gestured sharply toward the paper in Richard's hand, the itemized bill. My mother reached for it, and her eyes widened. Even from where I sat, I could see the bolded line, "Platinum discount removed. Standard rate applied. Cynthia's hand flew to her mouth. Derek muttered something under his breath. Richard remained unmoved. He nodded once, pointed to the payment line, and waited. Derek pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. My father turned his face away, jaw tight. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, trying to maintain dignity she no longer had. They left without looking at me. The staff opened the door, offered polite good nights, and let the cold swallow them whole. I didn't watch them walk across the snow. I just exhaled slowly, the weight of years shifting off my chest like ash falling from a long-burned fire. Dr. Robertson raised his glass again, his eyes kind. 2 piece hard-earned. To peace, I echoed. The rest of the meal passed like a bomb. Conversation flowed easily. Stories about grandchildren, travel plans, the Foundation's next scholarship drive. For once, I wasn't the quiet one listening from the edges. I was exactly where I was meant to be, among people who valued what couldn't be bought. When dinner ended, Richard appeared again at my side. Miss Halstead, he said softly, Charles would like a word in the lobby before you leave. I nodded. Of course. As I rose, Mrs. Robertson clasped my hand. Merry Christmas, Wren, she said warmly. You're the best kind of example, someone who proves you can have everything and still choose decency. Thank you, I said, voice catching a little. That means more than you know. In the lobby, the music faded behind me, replaced by the low murmur of conversation. Charles was waiting near the fire, cane in hand. I just wanted to say, he began, what you did tonight, letting them stay, was merciful. I'm not sure I would have managed that kind of restraint. I didn't do it for restraint, I said. I did it because sometimes the only lesson people understand is the one they have to live through publicly. He nodded, respect in his eyes. You've got steel in you, Miss Halstead. Runs in the family, I said, and he chuckled softly. When I finally stepped outside, the night was still and sharp again. The snow had stopped, leaving the parking lot clean and quiet, every car blanketed in white. My Subaru waited where I'd left it, humble as ever. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and let the heater hum to life. My phone buzzed on the console. A new message. Mom, we need to talk about tonight. I deleted it. A second vibration came a few seconds later. Derek, please, Wren, let's fix this. I stared at the text, the soft glow of it lighting my hands, then typed back. There's nothing to fix. You showed me exactly who you are. I believe you. Then I turned off the phone, shifted the car into drive, and pulled away from the club. In the rearview mirror, Riverside glowed gold against the night, a place that finally reflected what it was meant to be. Not a fortress of privilege, but a reminder that value has never been about money. The snow glittered in my headlights as I whispered into the dark, half to myself, half to the ghost of my grandmother. I kept the pearls, Gran. I just stopped trying to earn them. The next morning, the world was covered in a clean, glittering silence. The storm had passed, but the snow still clung to the trees like a secret that refused to melt. I woke up early, not out of habit, but because peace still felt unfamiliar. For once, there was no alarm, no meeting, no agenda waiting for me. Just sunlight spilling through the blinds and the faint hum of the heater. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. I didn't check it right away. I already knew what would be waiting. When I finally turned it over, I wasn't wrong. There were messages, my mother first, then my father, and finally Derek. Mom, we need to talk about what happened last night. It got out of hand. Dad, you embarrassed us in front of everyone. We deserve an apology. Derek, please, Wren, can we just put this behind us? You made your point. I read each one, then slowly, deliberately, deleted them. For years, I had built my life around their approval, waiting for praise that never came, shaping my choices around the hope of being seen. But last night proved what I had refused to admit for a long time. Some people will only see you when they can use you. And now that I couldn't be used, they finally noticed I existed. I poured myself coffee and stood by the window, watching the light scatter across the snow. It was quiet, almost sacred. The kind of morning my grandmother would have called a clean slate. At 9, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Richard Chin, impeccably dressed as always, holding a slim leather folder. Good morning, Miss Halstead, he said, offering a polite nod. I'm sorry to disturb you on the holiday, but you asked for a full report on the Anderson family's interactions with staff. Already? I said, surprised. He smiled faintly. I don't sleep well when the club is unsettled. I gestured for him to come in. He stepped inside, his shoes leaving neat impressions on the entry mat. He set the folder on my table and opened it carefully. We've compiled every incident since their membership began. It's extensive. Inside was a series of printed statements: valet staff, servers, kitchen personnel, even the golf course superintendent. Each entry was short, factual, damning. One read, Mrs. Anderson refused to acknowledge staff greetings multiple times, referred to valet as help. Another, Mr. Anderson complained about the temperature of the wine, asked if the owner could afford a decent sommelier. I exhaled slowly. Thank you, Richard. I know this isn't easy. He shook his head. It's necessary. Clubs like Riverside only survive because we hold our members accountable. That's what you've restored, accountability. I closed the folder. Make sure staff knows they're safe to speak up. No retaliation, ever. He nodded firmly. Already handled. Good, I said. And the Heritage Board? Charles called an emergency session this morning. Your anti-discrimination policy passed unanimously. I smiled, small but real. Fast work. You set the tone, Miss Halstead. The rest of us are just following it. He hesitated, then added quietly, I also wanted you to know. The staff was talking this morning. They were proud. They said it's the first time in years they felt truly protected. That landed deeper than I expected. Thank you, I said, my voice softer now. Tell them I'm proud of them too. Richard gathered his things, but before leaving, he paused. There's one more matter, the Anderson membership renewal. I raised an eyebrow. Ah, yes, the question of mercy. He smiled slightly. Precisely. Charles suggested immediate revocation, but I wanted to confirm your preference. I looked out the window again. The snow was beginning to melt along the sidewalk, the morning sun glinting off tiny rivulets of water. Honor the remainder of their year, I said finally, but make it clear, renewal isn't guaranteed. If there's no genuine change in their conduct, they can spend next Christmas somewhere else. Richard nodded once, understood. After he left, the apartment was quiet again, but the silence felt lighter now. I made another cup of coffee and opened my laptop to check the foundation inbox. There were thank you messages from scholarship recipients, updates from community partners, invitations to spring fundraising events. Real work. Real people. By noon, I took a walk through downtown. The city was calm after the storm. Storefronts glowing with leftover holiday lights, kids dragging sleds across the park. At one corner, I passed a family bundled in mismatched coats, laughing as they built a lopsided snowman. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to say. Money buys polish, not warmth. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting. My mother's voice, brittle and trembling. Wren, please call me. Your father and I, realize we may have said things we shouldn't have. You've embarrassed us terribly, but perhaps we can move past it. Family is family. I pressed delete without hesitation. That afternoon, the mail arrived, mostly holiday cards, and one formal envelope embossed with the Riverside Club seal. Inside was a printed statement confirming the board's new policy, signed by every committee member. Effective immediately. Any member found mistreating staff or guests based on perceived social or economic status will face disciplinary review and possible expulsion. At the bottom, in Charles Peyton's precise handwriting, was a note. For the record, thank you for reminding us who we're supposed to be. I placed the letter beside my grandmother's framed photo on the shelf. Later that evening, I decided to drive past the club. The sun was setting, the sky bruised purple and gold. The building glowed like a lantern against the snow, its windows fogged with laughter and warmth. For once, I didn't feel excluded from it. I felt detached, like an architect looking at something she'd repaired. As I slowed near the entrance, I saw a small group of staff standing near the door. Sharon, Mason, a few others, watching the snowfall with quiet smiles. They spotted my car and waved. I rolled down the window. Everything running smoothly? I asked. Better than ever, Sharon said. The staff wanted me to tell you. We're having a small get-together after hours tonight. Nothing fancy. Just cocoa, cookies, and a little relief. You're welcome to join. I smiled. Save me a cup. As I drove away, I thought about the night before. The slap of rejection disguised as etiquette. The hollow pride of people who valued optics over love. For years, I'd tried to belong to that world. I'd mistaken endurance for grace, silence for peace. But sometimes the best way to win isn't to get invited in. It's to own the building and change the rules. At a red light, I reached for my grandmother's pearls, feeling their smooth, familiar weight against my throat. She used to tell me, "Never let them decide your worth, Wren. They'll price you in whatever currency they understand." I smiled, whispering into the stillness of my car, "I finally learned, Gran." The light turned green, and I drove toward home, toward something real, something earned, and entirely mine. 2 weeks later, the decorations were still up at Riverside. Garlands dulled to a deeper green, poinsettias a little tired at the edges, but the spirit in the building had changed. The gossip had cooled into quiet respect. I walked through the lobby that morning, not as a daughter trying to fit in, but as what I had always been, the owner, and finally, the example I wanted the club to keep. Staff greeted me with genuine smiles, and not one of them looked afraid to make eye contact anymore. The place felt lighter, the air less brittle. Richard met me by the staircase, a folder tucked under his arm. "Good morning, Miss Halstead. You're early." "Old habits," I said. "What's the latest?" He handed me the folder. "Charles asked me to deliver this personally. The board unanimously approved your new conduct policy, effective immediately." Inside was the final version, stamped and signed by every board member. The words were clean, simple, uncompromising. Any member found treating guests or staff with disrespect due to perceived social or economic status will face suspension or termination of membership. No exceptions. I traced the header lightly with my thumb. "It's official then." Richard nodded. "You've changed the club, Wren. For the better." I smiled faintly. It's about time it reflected the people who actually keep it running. He hesitated, then said carefully, "I thought you'd want to know. The Andersons haven't been seen since Christmas. Word is they're laying low." "I'm sure they are," I said evenly. "There's talk among the members," he added, "about how you handled it. Most people think you were generous." "Do you?" I asked. Richard tilted his head. "I think you were merciful, which is rarer. Mercy's easier when you're done needing approval." He smiled. "I'll add that to the club motto." After he left, I walked toward the East Wing, the one lined with portraits of legacy members, the same men and women who had once treated this place like a fortress. Some faces were familiar, some were ghosts of arrogance past. I stopped in front of an empty frame, newly hung, labeled "Reserved for Outstanding Community Contribution." I wondered whose photo would end up there next. Sharon appeared beside me, carrying a clipboard. "Morning, Miss Halstead." "Staff bonus distributions went out last night. You should have seen their faces." "Good," I said. "They earned it." "And your foundation donation?" "Processed yesterday," I replied. $100,000 earmarked for local education and staff families. Consider it my own version of a Christmas gift. Sharon's expression softened. "You do realize that's not how most people with money behave, right?" "Maybe that's why I never fit with my family," I said. "They thought generosity was what you showed when someone was watching." She smiled. "You proved it's what you do when no one is." Outside, the sky was pale and thin, the snow melting into clean rivulets that caught the light. When I reached my office, a simple space overlooking the ninth hole, I found a note waiting on my desk. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "Wren, we've been thinking about what happened. We shouldn't have treated you the way we did. You didn't deserve that. If you're willing to talk, we'd like a chance to apologize in person. Mom and Dad." I sat back in my chair, the paper fluttering slightly in the breeze from the vent. An apology, finally. But there was a difference between remorse and accountability. I wasn't sure they understood that yet. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because silence can be the most honest boundary there is. Later that afternoon, Charles stopped by, cane tapping lightly on the tile. "How's our new policy author doing?" "Trying to decide if she's done enough," I said. He smiled. "Change never feels like enough. Not to the people who believe in it. But I'll tell you this. Riverside hasn't been this unified in years. You set the tone. Maybe now it'll stay that way." "It will," he said. "Not because they fear you, but because they respect you." I nodded, grateful. "Thank you, Charles, for everything." He hesitated at the door. "You know, when I first joined this board, I thought legacy meant money. Then I met you." After he left, I sat in the quiet for a while, looking out over the golf course, still rimmed with snow. The light hit the ice just right, turning it gold for a moment. It struck me that for years, I'd built my worth on other people's terms. Titles, achievements, ownership papers. But peace wasn't in any of that. It was here, in the silence that no longer hurt. That evening, I drove home with the windows cracked just enough to feel the winter air. My phone buzzed again, a new text from Derek. "I know you don't owe us anything, but I wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. I wish I'd said that sooner." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back. Thank you. It means more than you think. No promises, no reopening old wounds, just acknowledgement, clean and light. When I reached my apartment, I kicked off my boots and set my grandmother's pearls on the counter. They caught the glow of the kitchen light, warm and imperfect. I brewed tea, curled up by the window, and watched the city shimmer under fresh snow. For once, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. To them, to anyone. The club was running better than ever. The staff had found their voice. The members had found humility, and I had found freedom. As I sipped my tea, I thought of my grandmother's favorite phrase, one she'd repeated every Christmas, no matter how strained things got. You can't control the weather, Wren, only what you build in it. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and patient. And this time I wasn't standing in the cold, waiting to be let in. I had built my own warmth and opened the doors for others to step inside.